President Trump is putting his foot down against the New York Times for its recent blunder over sexual assault allegations against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Ahead of Monday night's rally in New Mexico, the president called for the resignation of everybody at the Times who were involved in the piece. He adds, quote, "And while you're at it, the Russian witch hunt hoax, which is just as phony." President Trump then called the New York Times by its nickname, saying they've taken the old gray lady and broken her down, destroyed her virtue, and ruined her reputation. He adds that under current management, she, referring to the Times, will never recover.
I think the New York Times made another terrible mistake. It's a shame that a thing like that could happen. I see they're making a big correction today. They've just announced there's a correction. But to do that about a Supreme Court justice is a terrible thing. It's a false accusation. Whatever happened with the New York Times, I mean, I can tell you personally, they never check, they never do. We used to have a thing called fact-checking. They don't do fact-checking anymore. They used to call and say, what about this, what about that? How can they do a thing like that and destroy somebody's life? I mean, they're destroying lives. And it's fake news. It's just fake news.
The president's comments echoes the sentiment of other high-profile Republicans who have slammed the left for making false allegations. And the Times receives bipartisan condemnation for botching its article that takes aim at Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. One America's Alex Salvi reports.
The paper of record is once again correcting the record. The latest misstep by the New York Times on Sunday involves new allegations of sexual misconduct against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The problem, however, is the fact the alleged victim declined to be interviewed for that story and doesn't recall the incident in question. More problematic is the fact that the New York Times didn't mention this fact until it issued an editor's note several hours after the original publication. In response, many conservatives say this is the type of smear that Kavanaugh spoke of during his confirmation hearing.
This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups.
The allegation was actually made by a classmate of Kavanaugh, Max Stier, who claims he witnessed the justice make the unwanted advance. However, this claim was never brought up during Kavanaugh's confirmation battle.
My office never received anything from Mr. Stier or his unnamed friends, and we never received an allegation against Kavanaugh like the one referenced in the report over this weekend.
Stier is a reputable lawyer who is now the president of a nonpartisan think tank, but he also worked as a Clinton defense lawyer during the Whitewater investigation, oftentimes going head-to-head with Kavanaugh himself. Critics of the Times say this demonstrates the lack of editorial standards when it comes to conservatives, while critics of the president say the paper is playing into his own hands.
And I just put out a statement on social media that said, I don't think they'll do it, but they should for the good of the nation. I call for the resignation of everybody at the New York Times involved in the Kavanaugh smear story.
Even the tweet promoting the story was problematic, with the author equating the alleged sexual misconduct as, quote, harmless fun, downplaying the allegation made in the 11th paragraph of the article. And some even suggest that the authors didn't have faith in their own reporting, acknowledging that, if true, the claim would have been headline-worthy. The article was posted in the Times opinion section, which builds on a growing trend of blunders dating back to 2016 when James Bennett took over as editor. In 2017, the Times published an editorial that linked an advertisement from Sarah Palin's Political Action Committee to a 2011 shooting in Tucson that killed 6 people and injuring then-Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. In April of this year, the Times International section published a blatantly anti-Semitic cartoon. And most recently, the Times faced criticism for the actions of columnist Bret Stephens, who contacted a professor's employer after being called a bedbug on Twitter and then wrote an op-ed comparing the criticism to the language used against Jewish people in Nazi Germany. The paper has been reviewing its internal practices for months, but questions remain as to whether changes can be made before the missteps have a permanent effect. Alex Salvi, One America News.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.